That's right. Okay, so let's get to the main segment here, and of course, I'm
Segment number
sure we'll be
two.
done. Yeah, and I'm sure we might be done earlier. So if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them here, and we'll
We could
get to
watch
it before
YouTube
we close
videos or
out today.
something later.
Yeah, exactly. This is a week without a podcast episode, but it is a week with a blog post because usually that's every week. Um, this week I wrote as not a response. I mean, it was inspired by Berkeley Breeds, and we kind of talked about it in that VOD, which you can see on our YouTube. It's like from 2 weeks ago, where I talk about who I think the blog is for, and you can read it. It's on a little bit of fresh.com. I talk about how it's mainly for myself. Like I am my own audience. Like when I read it, I want to be able to be like, it's the blog in general is like me convincing myself that I am a coherent person and that I like this thing. And I need to put this stuff out there. It's kind of
Just
like how
you presenting
if
your
you're a
opinion.
yeah, it's also like it's kind of similar also to like say if like as a composer, like you have this like melody in your head and you need to like make it into a piece, otherwise this thing's gonna be stuck in your head, you know. So that's kind of what it is. And if there was an audience, it would be guys like MJ, who are like my friends and who like approach clothes and maybe life in the same way. Like the blog is not for a corporate guy. It is not for um it is not supposed to be like a step-by-step list recommendation kind of a place. It is like, like if you're a guy like me, that's kind of MJ. Uh, and you're like, oh, I like tailoring, but I like kind of vintage, but I don't want to look like this, blah blah blah. If you have all of that same kind of commonality, this is like the blog for you. And this is why the blog has taken so long or the podcast also to be like, oh, we should like make a Patreon because I'm like, for a while I'm like, I don't even know who it would be because MJ doesn't pay for any. In fact, he loses money by working on it technically. I mean, for a while he would spend his time doing it. Um, but um, but as over the years, Spencer and I have noticed that there's a lot of like commonalities here between the people that do read the blog. I mean, the blog and the podcast have some people that enjoy it. That's not our friends. That it's not in our immediate friend group, and we've talked also about how the podcast was made just as a outlet for me and Spencer to talk on about clothes because before that we would just go live on Instagram and talk.
Yeah.
And then we were like, oh, let's just make this a podcast. Um, and so, yeah, I thought we would kind of talk about the kind of people that we've kind of noticed and who we think the blog is, and the blog and podcast and this whole thing is for. And if we've also noticed if there's commonalities between the people who approach clothing in the same way that we do. Because I was talking with Kiyoshi on Wednesday after our zombie stream. It's a great epic VOD if you guys want to get stressed out with MJ and Spencer and Jason. And after we were kind of talking and we kind of realized that a lot of the guys in the Discord, a lot of the friends that we have that are into menswear in the same way, have like a background in they're kind of nerdy. They kind of have some like self-esteem issues or confidence issues, there's this kind of like wondering about being appropriate. But then there's also that part fighting against like this idea of like, oh well, I'm just a fucking nerd, who the fuck cares, like I like playing video games or whatever, like there's a little bit of self-awareness to it. And if the lives align, you end up finding the blog and the podcast and the Discord at some point,
I will say
And
just, or well, no, finish your thought, but then I just have some
go ahead. Go ahead.
anecdotal. So anecdotally, based on who has the couple times that I have been recognized in public, for the podcast slash appearing on Ethan's blog or whatever, I would say our demo definitely in the 18 to 25
Younger.
range.
Yeah.
Usually like college age, usually guys on like a lower income. Could Spencer move closer to the mic? Yeah, sure. Guys on a lower income who are, shopping at places like J. Crew or Banana Republic or whatever, trying to get a more classic look.
Yeah, And it's usually guys like that, right? Who like feel like they want something cooler than that,
Mhm.
but they, they're like, oh, I don't know where else to go. Or, and then the thing is, they usually kind of know either about vintage or like contemporary tailoring too, right?
But they
Like
trying to
they
like
usually
replicate
are,
the look with like mall brands rather than going to the source or whatever.
and that's a very common thing,
Hmm.
you know. And I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, I wonder if every place is like this, right? Like, I mean, Permanent Style probably has a demographic that is like guys like like middle to upper middle class like him, and they live in London and they buy
Yeah.
bespoke clothing. Like, so I mean, this is like this idea that that the audience is like us is nothing really new, but it's interesting to see like when we dive deeper, like even like some of the like. Oh, I'm not gonna say that no one out like there's not a lot of nerds out there, but like a lot of us, we like the same kind of stuff. Like almost like it's pretty close, right? Like there's a lot of Star Wars nerds, Star Trek nerds, lots of like, musically inclined people or creative inclined people, but not exactly like artists, like studio artists. It's just kind of like guys who just kind of enjoy a variety of hobbies that maybe are a little bit on the nerdier side, maybe. Um, I feel like that also translates to how different it is to the people who come to the blog with a different mindset of like, okay, well, I need to dress better. Usually, the people that kind of latch on the best are people who kind of already have it.
Hmm.
Spencer, you know what I mean, Spencer? Like
Yeah.
they like not like maybe they're not there exactly, but it's like kind of like MJ, where like like as we were friends, and maybe it's like a a we've been friends for he's been around, so like he didn't start from zero. Like we didn't just meet like 5 years ago, and then all of a sudden he's like where he is now. But it's still like that idea where he's really receptive to it. He's able to kind of discern stuff, and that's also why like MJ can know the difference between like different types of video games. Like
Hmm.
let's make that a good
Yeah.
example. He's also able to tell the difference between like different types of music, and not just like, oh, that's rap, that's this, but like like, oh, this is, I don't know, J-pop versus J-rock. I mean, I mean, I
Yeah.
can't even. I don't know that, but like, there's still this kind of this idea that you're able to differentiate between things. MJ, and maybe it's just about like having like taking pride in having the vocabulary
Hmm.
in order to understand something. And it doesn't have to be menswear, but like applying that idea to things is something that's very important that I've noticed has happened in this world, and usually it's because it's dirty, right?
Yeah.
Like not everything is Star Wars, right? Like, you're able to be like, well, that's Age of Rebellion. This is Age of
Yeah.
Resistance stuff. Like there's. I think that we've been taught that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. David, yeah, exactly. Appreciation of minutia.
Hmm.
That's a very big thing that I've
Exactly.
noticed.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild, and then it kind of comes to odds. And luckily, we were talking with young Chomsky who was visiting over the weekend. Um, the Discord has like, we've got a couple of new guys coming in, and you know they might not come at it with that appreciation, but over time, I think if as they go on, they start to be able to like apply to other things, because it's very clear. Like I guy who's in there, and we're like, oh, what do you like to do? Like, oh, he likes Star Wars. I'm like, okay, maybe I gotta think about things in like describing Star Wars, to this
Mm.
guy. Not overtly, but it's like when you see like there's a difference between like airborne clone trooper armor and fucking like bark troopers, right? Like there's clearly a difference, to a person who's like super outside of it, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's just a stormtrooper,
Hmm.
you know like, but when you get into it, right, there's so many, like, it's like the helmets are different, the visors, the respirators, I don't know. Like it's cool to see when the people that actually that are already into it. When the blog is kind of like, oh, I finally found the place. It's like
Hmm.
it's really fun to see that happen. And that's not to say I don't appreciate the new guys, like the guys who like who completely are
Yeah.
starting their style from scratch. But in terms of the people who like, the early Patreon people, the friends of ours that we've like, that we've actually hung out with or that we talk to a lot, like Jason and John and Young Chomsky, um, there is this kind of like similar personality upbringing. I don't know, Spencer, MJ, Matt, what do you guys think?
Well, you kind of touched on this, but I think the people that best connect with, I don't know, the podcast or the, like, you know, what you're talking about, like the ideal like reader are people who go into style not saying, you know, as you, like I said, you kind of touched on this, they don't want just say I want to dress better, or I want to dress to be successful at my job, or I want to dress to get laid. They want to dress to look like a like specific thing. Like they have like, this is what I want to look like in mind. And it's like, you and I think both did this. Like even before I got into vintage, like in preschool, it was like, I want to be a pirate, so I'd like wear a fucking pirate costume. Or in middle school, when I was first getting into clothing, but before I had really gotten into vintage, I wasn't like, oh, I just want to dress cool. I had like a picture of like George Harrison and like, or Kurt Cobain or whatever, and I'd be like, I want to look like this. And it's, I feel that's like the
Matt, you had that too, right?
Yeah.
Matt, you had like the whole like Victorian thing, or like the kind of was Adam Lambert like idea in your head too, right? Yeah,
you hold on to these people, these like, oh my god, and you're just like, what do I have to do to be like that? And then I think the ingredient here for all of this is that you have to actively seek it out. You have to be interested. It's not just knocking on doors and saying, hey, tell me about X, Y, and Z, how to dress better, how to get laid. It's about like seeking it out and worming your way into these groups and communities.
And in terms of like nerdy stuff, like it literally kind of is cosplay, right? Like it's at least it starts out with that kind of stage.
We have a couple people that get a little bit bristly at the word cosplay. I mean, it is.
Oh,
like,
really?
It is like we're using it tongue in cheek. Yeah, because it's like, you know, it gets in. We had our whole thing on authenticity.
Well, they need to loosen up. That's our MO too.
Hey, cosplay is authentic too, because you get cosplay as whatever character you want.
Yeah, I'm
exactly.
actually.
There's a reason.
I'm actually akin to whatever. I'm like akin to Bryceland's or whatever. So that's why I dress like this. I'm a Bryceland's kin.
Dude, yeah.
But then again, it's like we know we're in the know, we get it. But then it's like all of the percentage of our followers or whatever who don't really know our sensibilities. We dress like Drakes, we dress like Brycelands. They don't know the difference. We just look nice, and so they're not calling us out on it.
We're just dapper to them, right?
Right, exactly. And we take it like dicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a funny analogy where it's like nothing to explain, an inside thing already, like what we do with an inside analogy, but Spencer might get it, where it's like we love on cinema, and the notion of trying to explain that whole universe to someone is like impossible.
You can't do it.
So if there's like a friend who wants to like dress better, I can't just. I mean, I always recommend the blog and podcast to anyone trying to get better, but it's like you can't just say. Jump in.
Yeah, it's really.
Go listen to these 80 podcast episodes or etc.
That's crazy.
You know,
someone one of the first ever people, like the compliments I ever got was like someone said that my blog, podcast, whatever is like a case study in like holistic marketing, where like you have to like feeds into each other, and you'll be lost if you don't like take in everything. Right? It's like it's like an MCU.
We should do a survey to like how these people get into it. Like, what have you soaked up to like get there? Was it enough? You're just like, okay, I want to learn more.
I am curious, but something recent. Let me see if I can read the. Let me read the comment real quick here. Let me just say, jump in and chat with. Sorry, I was in the middle of like updating the thing. But he commented. He commented that in regards to the blog and podcast, he said, just say even so for again to reference the blog, I said like, you know, it really helps if you have the same background as we do, because like a lot that goes into this, as we said, like not just intentional with how you dress, understanding minutia, but it's like all of us here are not going to work in a corporate environment. Like there's like we might have to wear a suit, but it like we don't have to be super corporate.
Or we make it our way if we have to. It's not that vibe.
Yeah, exactly. And it's you know, there's also the aspect of like we're all young, so like, oh well, what are you gonna like, you know, like we can't, there's a little bit of leeway because like, you know, we're young guys, right? We're also not buying like the best of the best, like, and that's why my blog doesn't cover that, because we're young, where some of us are still in school, blah blah blah, and everything. And also if you're Asian American, it kind of helps because usually Asian Americans, they're immigrants, they have no real ties to to like the roots of menswear. Like a lot of people, like, oh, my grandfather dressed up, or my family had like suits, or my dad had a tailor, my dad had a fedora, and yeah, our grandparents might have dressed well, but like my grandpa like moved here in the 70s, and he had like one suit before that, and it was like he got it for his wedding. Like it's like. It's so far removed. He doesn't know what fucking ivy or trad is.
Yeah,
so
in
to
Southern
me,
California,
my
no
entire
one has that experience.
Oh wow.
yeah, exactly. And but maybe if you're like white, or if your family's been here, you might have like had something like that. Where like maybe like your grandpa or whatever. There was tailoring in Pasadena and tailoring in LA. But in terms for me and MJ, it's like that's why a lot of our connotations that we make, or that I make to Ivy, is like based on fucking popular culture, because how would I know, right? Like all I could think of is like, yeah, fucking like movies where a guy's wearing the tight sweater. I never saw a dude do that IRL until like maybe I was like driving through Beverly Hills, and there's like an 80-year-old white guy whose family has like had a law firm there, like I don't see that. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of specific to Ethan, to me, and maybe my friends in that regard, where best if you have that somehow in your life, you're far removed from it, you don't really work in menswear, but you maybe had like a retail job in it or something, you are familiar with like Mark Cho, blah blah blah. It's easy to get into that, because like if you already work at the Armory, what the hell's my blog to you for? Like, right? There's just no reason. But anyway, this comment says, even if we don't have your background or ethnicity, and even though it's kind of tough to get into the lore of the blog, and he put in parentheses, don't get on mic, anybody? And I think that's really good. But he says, but it's not different. It's not any different than getting into something with a rich history and fan base, like film series, books, video games, anime, and music, or even sports. I get what you feel, but believe me, the way you write about these topics, these stuffy topics, is what makes them enjoyable, even for people who do not share your point of view or agree with you. Even if you get annotations on your work, it's funny. That's a good. He's like, see, I'm getting into the lore, and I think that's pretty funny.
You are like irreverent, but you care. Like you have the passion, but you're not taking it too seriously.
Right? Yeah, I have like no ill will with anybody. We might be like, I mean, maybe not Christian Chensfold, because some of the stuff is kind of weird, but in general, there's nothing really that we're not enemies with permanent style. In fact, like I reference permanent style because there's no other good. I can't think of a place other than maybe like a style forum, like literal threads about bespoke or whatever, that you could learn that much about tailoring or the history of it, or even see it, right? But that thing about, see, like that's what I'm saying. Like if you can recognize that the approach is like, it's like Wikipedia, right? It's like Star Wars. Like to get the most sense, you gotta get every piece of it. Like there's books, there's audio plays, there's fucking legends for you to reference from. Like that's what I grew up with, and so
then
like,
there's
again,
all the Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, it kind of makes sense where if you can realize that about this in the podcast, it doesn't have to be Star Wars, it could be like comedy. Especially if you're, I know Kiyoshi didn't like Comedy Bang Bang, or
I think you should leave.
I think you should leave. But it's like if you can like recognize what's happening there, or if you do like it, I feel like you'll be like, oh, that's what Spencer and Ethan and MJ are doing, like that's.
Well, it's like you guys got me into that, and it's like my favorite thing now. And there are like 900, like not 900, but there are like hundreds and hundreds of episodes where it's like, where if you're invested in this thing, you seek out the previous things, you go back, you engage yourself. It's just about how into it you are. And even if people don't do that, they can still just keep up with the fresh things and just enjoy that too. So there's something for everyone.
Yeah.
We have a comment from Dan. When I recommend Ethan's blog to normies, here's what I say. Focus on the mindfulness. You don't have to like what Ethan likes. You have to understand his attention to detail and his commitment to those details and how they help him pull together a cohesive style language. I think we've said this, but a lot of the podcast episodes where it comes down to like, oh, we don't really come to a conclusion. A lot of this is just like, it's just, I guess, I don't like to, I guess the quote unquote value in that is you get to hear us just discuss how we think of it, and maybe that can help you inform how you think of it,
if anything, it's like for the opinionless, where it's like if they don't have an opinion on belts, and then you
Yeah.
listen to a 45-minute episode of people talking about belts, and you're like, oh, I definitely don't, or like reading a blog post, oh, I definitely don't like that. That
and
might work
it's-
for
and
me.
it's-
They
and
can
it's not
start to
even,
form their
and
own
it's not
thing.
even, like saying it's like, oh, you have, it's, as he said, it's you don't have to like what we like, but we're teaching you how to think. We're propagandizing.
Yeah, sure. Thoughts.
Or
You're
beaming
promoting
the thoughts.
Yeah.
Or beaming the thoughts right to you.
Yeah, but it's like, we're teaching you how to form your own opinions. Is how I hope.
Yeah.
This is what I hope we are doing.
That was the original subtitle of the blog.
Yeah. Helping you
Didn't catch
form
on.
your own opinions.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, like I mean, not always, but like I sometimes feel sad when people like don't get it. Like I know that that's kind of like the point too, where like
It's just
it's
demographics.
only for the but it's also like I just maybe it's because I want people to get it.
Sure.
Like it would make it out, it would make clothing just a lot more fun for these people, I think, right?
But we've talked
Like,
about
and-
before where we do not want everyone dressing like us.
Absolutely not. I get mad when
Yeah.
the TikTok teens try to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like I
problem.
like the idea that if they're approaching clothes in the same way, right?
Right.
Like I just want I would rather you have
That
that, but
approach.
that's ultimately harder, and with these guys who kind of like join in here in the blog, like I understand like some of the resistance. I think now, especially as the blog gets more and more popular, at least people find it on Reddit, and people find that we've had people in the Discord like who have joined here. Not like, to me, the Discord, the Patreon is meant for people who want to support the podcast. It is people who already listen to it
I
and
really
go,
think
you
we
know
should
what?
start, just marketing that separately. It's to like, here's a great menswear community, because that's how people are finding it.
Well, that's what I'm
Right.
saying. So it's like
Just
it's
one.
it's like when the people come in, which were like, oh, I listened to one episode. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna give $5 a month. I'm gonna join this Discord. It's like, and I feel not feel bad, and I'm glad that the people are still here. But it's like there is that like difference between now the people who are coming to this are not thinking about it in the way that we do. They might have the same background, but that idea about dressing intentionally, like this kind of like semi cosplay aspect, is like kind of like new, and especially like they just lack the vocabulary. And a part of that could just be that they have to watch all the other episodes to understand. Like when I say diet in the forest, you could be like, what the fuck's that? But if
then you have
go
to watch
through
all the
other
Star
stuff,
Wars sequels.
yeah, then you gotta watch them and figure out like, oh, the diet.
Well, I mean-
See, that's why they made the rule of 2.
It's
Yeah.
twofold, where it's like you're gonna get people as you get more people, you're gonna find more. You're gonna find contrary opinions, but eventually, what we do notice with people who do join, they not like a hive mind, but we all have, again, which I'm sure we'll talk about, similar sensibilities. Which I think even the new people, they come to feel the same way, just talking with us and all that. But again, as more join in, I think we will start to see some of these contrasts a little more stridently. I'm sure.
But
What's something interesting? Yeah, go ahead, MJ.
I think the people that stick around, though, maybe not always have had, but at whatever point in time, have like the same approach or same mindset, like with their other hobbies, like you mentioned, like however much they get into their other hobbies will be similar to how they get into their clothes. Because I think we've maybe not in the sad Discord, but like in our other chats, how we talk about like basic fans of like stuff, how it's kind of it's like I watch all the Star Wars movies and that's like about it, versus I watch the Star Wars movies and I like the lore of the video games, and like we know the novels and stuff like that.
They're so right. I mean, like, there's a thing about when as we get to know these guys in Discord, and some of the original like 20 people in there, we know a lot about these people, which is really great. But you start to find out that like, oh yeah, like some of us have collected action figures, like there is this kind of dedication to it.
Yeah, that go back like 20 years, right?
Those ties,
but I mean, like we talked with Kyoshi. I don't know if Kyoshi's fucking mic works, because I know he was saying
Does
on
it
Discord.
work?
Hey, we hear
Oh,
you.
there we go. Yeah.
There.
Yeah, but like Kyoshi, like you used to collect action figures too, right, or something like that?
Yeah, I had Star Wars was one of several.
Yeah,
I had some
see?
Gundam. I had some. My brother had some Evangelion. I had some Matrix
Nice.
action figures.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
you look at this stuff, right? Like our friend John, who we saw earlier inside his Saturday, wearing like the hoodie with the vest, like literally posts on like mock pages, which if you don't know is like what like the Lego site where you make like your own builds of stuff. Like he's made like his version of what an X-wing would look like, and not like a fanfic. What I'm talking about, like it still is screen accurate, but the approach is done almost like a master builder for like Lego. But like that's like a big thing, right? Where we realize that the people who at least initially really get into it are like they're super into, as David said, minutia, and they really go full force in this kind of stuff. And something again that I realized that when we get into odds with some people who again still read the blog, still listen to podcasts, but sometimes maybe haven't like had the full, like they haven't dive deep in like short coats, bucket hats, berets, or whatever. They don't all they sometimes don't have a lot of that kind of approach. Actually, more of like
I think
the
it ties
normie
back
ones
to
who,
like the
want it
finances
better.
talk you talked about earlier, where it's like we are very similar in like like a lot of the 1825 to 25 demo, where they're just like they're not paying the prices that we're paying for the clothing that we are. That doesn't enter into it. They're looking for just the cheap surface option because it's like that's what they know. But ideally, if they subject themselves to all the writings and the podcasts, they realize, oh well, if I can just put the same amount of, it's not like they're paying exorbitant costs. It's just like, okay, just not buying fast fashion and just like saving, buying more quality. So it's tying into all this other stuff where it's just like taking it's fueling your passion and letting that take you and not just like stopping at a certain point because you don't care. It's like, and that's why the minutia kicks in, where it's like these people are really into this one thing, so they keep exploring rather than putting these things behind in childhood and then just moving on. We love things, and we love to love things.
Yeah, I mean, it really helps if you do that.
Peace and love.
What something I realized, I was talking with young Chomsky about dating and just in general, because we were talking about my girlfriend and everything, and something I also realized is kind of related to like how like the blog, the podcast are not meant for like the menswear industry and the hardcore enthusiasts. Like it's not meant for Mark Cho. Like what does Mark Cho have to gain from listening to any of this?
Yeah.
Maybe the community aspect, maybe to to hear us
like it stopped at Blammo.
Love the store. Like yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, but it's like, do celebrities watch talk shows? You know what I mean? Like it's like why would they do it? They don't need to like. I mean, maybe it's like funny. They'll like tune in if it's like someone interesting. But like
I think it's the people, right?
Exactly, but like our thing is like something totally like do celebrities watch random YouTube videos, like YouTube essays, right? Like why would that happen? And so there's an aspect of like where I notice on the opposite, where the people who are not into the blog or not as active on it is like people who work in the industry. Like there's just nothing to offer those people. Then on the other side of it, I realize that on the side of, if you have to work in a very corporate environment, the blog is kind of hard to get into because it tells you to do things that you just literally can't do.
Yeah.
But there is a difference between like, there's also that, and a lot of what menswear is working in sales. And that's kind of a different
industry.
Yes, like almost all the jobs are sales. Like I mean, other than like the guys that we see are salespeople, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they are like technically Chase and Matt, right? Like they're like fitters on the floor. Like, yeah, Matt, they might help out with the creative direction of it, but they're still like work on the floor with clients, right? Mark Cho works on the floor sometimes at the Armory. Of course, like Alex Winchell and Dan Quigley who work on the floor at the Armory. There's stuff like
Halo
that.
works on the floor.
Right. There's like the journalists or whatever. I also don't know what they need. Like I don't think we say anything new in general. But that sales mindset is kind of interesting because like usually that means that you are kind of stuck. Well, but stuck might be a strong word, but like you are in like you work for a brand. So a lot of your clothes are from that singular brand. So you're also not afforded a lot of freedom to try a lot of new things, right? Like you have to wear head to toe Drakes, you have to wear head to toe Armory.
So that's certainly not corporate, but I think it's similar in corporate where it's like you have like a set of confines to work within. And so even if you had the challenge of working in a corporate environment but still having these interests, I think it could be an interesting challenge. How far can you push these boundaries? Can you mess with things like house cuts and all that stuff within a corporate structure? So, and then same if you're like working at Drix and you have to wear Drix pieces, or God forbid you work at Brooks Brothers and you have to wear Brooks Brothers stuff. How can you make it similar to your sensibilities?
It's the sad part though is that the people who are salespeople are probably the best proponents of wearing your clothing and being practical with it, because it's like I was talking to the guy who works at Giaya Kashmir, David, and he was saying that he learned how to use his suits, like pants and pockets and everything, because he worked at like Brunello, where they wouldn't change after work. They would be like, well, why would I change? I'll just go straight from like, I wore this to work and I'm going to wear it to the bar, have dinner, And so because they treat the clothing as a uniform of sorts, and by uniform I mean like a practical thing that you have to wear to work, they just treat it like fucking whatever, That's why you see like, like Jake Grantham and all these guys wear their suits. And the sad part is what we're trying to say is that because you're not used to wearing the suit often, it's hard to get into that mindset. So it's like a catch-22 where, our approach to clothing is, in general, not just a blog, but our entire vibe is like trying to capture utility of how the menswear industry treats their clothing, but without working in the menswear industry.
Yeah.
Right, and because it is specifically the menswear industry, because that's the extreme spectrum to the other, where it's like you're the guy who wears a suit once or twice in his life, and he has to protect it at all costs. It's the exact opposite. So explaining that to someone is impossible.
Right, because it's like, these guys don't have the context for wearing the suit that much, right? And I mean, it makes sense too. Like all the illustration, all the pictures that we use to illustrate our points are guys who are in the men's industry or are very tangential, very closely
related,
have a close relationship, related to the menswear industry. Yeah, and so thing is, like, if it helps if you are aware of the industry to that regard and you get into it, right? As opposed to if you're completely, like, I talk about the Asian Americans group all the time, but like they can't fathom like wearing the clothes like this, because it's like why would they, right? Like they don't know anybody, that has to wear that stuff and then wears it out, right?
And I mean,
so it's kind of
immediately changing if they had to wear it.
Most people don't own more than one suit. Obviously, that's a hard sell because they gotta, they gotta keep that thing safe.
Their one suit is fused
for every wedding they go to for the next 15 years.
Right. And then say if you work at the armory, right? Like, you get your navy balloon suit, but then you're like, okay, well, I want to wear something different to work. Okay, I can get like a check, right? And they get to like have all this kind of stuff, and they are, maybe it's us idealizing that, because maybe like they don't fucking care. Like if they didn't work at the army, maybe they just wouldn't wear that shit, right? Like it's hard to tell sometimes, like how much tailoring it could be. Just like, I mean, Kiyoshi, right? Like you're a good example of that, where like you've relaxed your dress code over the past couple of years of working at Hall Madden, and so like like you still wear, like you find ways to incorporate like what you could be into outside of work into your thing. Like you commission like a Western shirt and you wear it with like a nice like sleek suit, but like it's like one of those things where if you didn't have that at all, like how much of like do you love tailoring that much to fucking wear it? It's weird.
It's changed because it's like when I first got into tailoring, mind you, I worked in government, so that was the reason why I got into tailoring, was because it was like that's not just what people wore, but that's also, it's kind of like, oh, I can learn about this area and like lean fully into it and still have some creativity as someone who's I wasn't on policy side, I was on the writing side, communications. So, there's a little bit more, I felt like it's still almost a kind of a creative field. But as I was into tailoring more and more and leaving that industry and eventually work in menswear, you begin to get bored of wearing the same thing all the time, honestly.
Yeah.
And I recognize the fact that now that I'm just straight up just into clothing, I'm a bit growing more agnostic about what aesthetic or style that is. I'm more willing to try different things outside of just tailoring. So, even though now my job has become even more hyper focused on what you could essentially say as is predominantly event driven suiting, aka weddings.
Right.
For me, like my interests have grown well beyond that scope. And if I wasn't doing this job, I probably would have like one or two suits. Like, I don't think I would even own a sport coat, honestly. I would probably wear more jeans and shirts and outerwear pieces and knits or something more comfortable. It's more stretchy, just a lot more relaxed. I probably wouldn't wear a lot of tailoring. It's not that I wouldn't be interested in it, but it's just it wouldn't be a very predominant part of the total wardrobe.
You find yourself kind of like we talked about before, where you're already in the stuff, you're already in the quote unquote uniform, so you just wear it out. I don't know if we've talked about this before. I can't quite remember if we have.
We've kind of touched on that.
It's a little bit like advertising too, right? Because it's like if I go somewhere nice and I'm meeting, some acquaintances or that would introduce me to new people. If you tell people that you work in tailored clothing and you're just wearing like shorts and a t-shirt, it's like, well, it doesn't make any sense.
That's a good point,
right? But and you're at a place where you could have dressed better, If you're at a dive bar, that makes sense, right? But
right.
So like for me, it's just kind of like I do wear some pieces sometimes, just to be able to say, like I made this for myself, kind of thing.
Right.
Just as kind of like an interesting talking point, but yeah, I think if I was not doing this and not in this field, it would be a very different set of clothes. It would probably be the rest of my wardrobe I have at home that I never wear because I'm wearing a suit 6 days a week.
Because you just don't get to.
Right.
I never get to wear it, so I would be wearing all the other stuff I never get to wear.
I think the thing, regardless through line, whether or not you're like someone that just loves wearing suits or loves wearing casual wear, is that again like the people that we tend to connect with, and I mean this is I think true for most of the like menswear community in general, as opposed to the like I guess fashion community or like YouTube menswear stuff, is we're not dressing for like I guess defined goal, like self-improvement thing of like I'm doing this for to advance and work or to get a girlfriend, as I said before. It is purely just because you enjoy dressing. Like
it's not.
Yeah,
I mean, I say this trepidatiously. I don't know that it's so much for approval. I know that's sort of hard to say because I'm sure obviously we like affirmation, but it is a lot more so. I think probably about just how we feel in it and us, rather than
absolutely. It is. Yeah, definitely how we feel in it. Because if I dressed, based on like, if I dressed for everyone else's approval, I would dress way differently. I like to catch myself in the mirror, reflection in the window, and be like, "Damn, this is how I want to look." That's like that's why I dress.
Right.
So this thing was really interesting because that shows just in general how our vibe is compared to everybody else, right? Most stuff, even the industry itself, most of the writing and the content that comes out of it is supposed to sell people who are not into it into the idea of menswear, right? And by that, in terms of what Matt said about self-improvement, like, oh, you gotta wear this, like, if you look at all the Drake's copy, right? It's not for the menswear, like the hashtag menswear crowd, even though that's who ends up buying it, because I don't think a lot of normies people buy Drake's anyway, but it's still like the copy is like, oh, the classic Oxford button-down collar, here's the history and here's why you should get it, right. There's still that. And so because I don't do that, and my focus is maybe like how my lifestyle like drives, and my lifestyle and interests drive my appreciation of clothes. What I found, and that we've talked with Kiyoshi on Wednesday after Spencer left, is that and I mean this lovingly, but sometimes the audience of the blog tends to be kind of very not introverted, but kind of like isolated in a sense. Like everyone in this, in like the commonality is that people follow this in like a bunch of different places. People could be in New York, people could be in London, but then there's also the fact that people like in like that's like fucking like Midwest areas or whatever, or they live in like Arizona or Texas or whatever, and they often are the only ones who maybe not just like aren't into clothes, but maybe are into like things in general. Like they sometimes like we have a really great discussion like all the time on like film and culture and art, and lots of people in the Discord are very well read, very well cultured, and they're usually, and sometimes I get the idea based on some other conversation I had, like, oh yeah, my friends aren't like really into movies, or my friends aren't really like creative, like they don't do photography or whatever, and by extension, their friends aren't really into clothes. They don't really get this, the same kind of attention to minutia that David was saying, and that's something super interesting to me because I don't think like you don't get that complaint on like I mean, that I've seen like on the comments like, oh, I'm the only one into permanent style. Like they don't really have like that kind of like that longing for community on those other places. I don't know
as an isolated
really
Midwesterner, there's no one that dresses this way in this state, in this city, and just
right.
like and just like you're going crazy, just like until you see like something like this online, and you're shaking the people through the computer saying, "Yeah, let me in." I need to talk to somebody about this. I need to learn more, get this off my chest, and then you find it.
The subtitle for the podcast, it should be Style and Direction, the podcast for lonely people.
Yes. Make lonely people less lonely.
Yeah.
And just like they're not losing their mind. That hey, you can be into these things, and there are all these other people too who you don't see in person, but they exist and they're into it, and then you get to join them. So it's a very satisfying place. And yes, there are people all over the world who don't have that in-person experience that this provides sanctuary for.
That idea of like community thing is like, I don't know if it's been explicitly said. I mean, maybe I do say that I want it to happen, and maybe I just by sheer force of will I just make it happen.
Sure.
Because it's like, I mean, if I think about it, right? Like I was in that spot. I was the only one out of all my friends who was into clothing. I was also maybe like, some of us did collect like MJ had Gundam, and same thing with Scott or whatever. Yeah. But like in terms of like Star Wars, like I think I was like, I mean, MJ lives kind of far, but like I was like the main friend into Star Wars, at least from my school, in that little school friend group. So there was the idea like I gotta find more people who are as into it as I am, and so maybe just by the people who read the blog and listen to the podcast, like since I tend to share a lot of similarities with these people, especially early on in my life, it kind of makes sense that these guys are also kind of like, hey, I'm the only one who's doing this. I don't have an outlet for it. I don't know what I can do, and of course, the only thing we can do is just has to plug the Discord, right? But it's kind of it sometimes makes me sad that like that things have to be this way, and if my ultimate goal in general is kind of like I just want people to like to have this same approach to life. I mean, the same approach to menswear in their life, because like we said, like I analyze film score very closely to the same way I talk about menswear. But I like to collect certain things. I also collect Black Series action figures. I also do deep dives into TV tropes on every Marvel thing, every Star Wars thing, every piece of content that I watch. Right, so like it kind of makes sense that there's a spillover, and it makes me wish I could be friends. Not seriously. I mean, like let's have some boundaries here.
Boundaries, yeah, right.
But like the idea, I wish that this was kind of like if this was like if I had a store, it would be cool to have people in my store, right? Like that's kind of the idea, and I don't really have that, but this is the best we can do. It's just interesting for me to notice that commonality among a lot of people here, and the sad part also is that sometimes these people also get the flack from their friends because they dress that certain way. They also lack the ability, and this mainly goes more of like a social media standpoint, like they lack the ability to prove that they can be slouchy because they just kind of like you lack friends who like minutia and other creative hobbies. Kind of hard to be yourself in that respect, right? Like, we kind of touched on it, me and Kiyoshi, where I think that the reason why a lot of my friends or people that I've been into like really get into clothing is because I document everything. And so if they know I'm taking their picture, there's an added thing of like, oh, I gotta look good. Like there's this actual part where like I'm going to be seen somewhere. And I don't want to force people to dress well. I like to document all my friends, but maybe they can recognize that some of the best pictures come when people are just kind of being themselves in the clothing that they like. The part for me early on was that because I lacked this community for myself, whenever I met someone, I would document it, like Spencer, for example, and then it would create like a visual narrative, a visual cinematic universe of sorts. It's like, okay, this is what that's like, and it eventually extended to like other stuff. I mean, I don't know, MJ, do you think that you kind of got into it more the more fit pics and pictures I took of you? Does that help at all, or how did that apply?
Probably, but I mean, it kind of came like together, right? It wasn't just like a singular part of it that I thought about, where it's like, oh, we're gonna go somewhere, and like we're seeing other people, so it's a chance for me, especially how I'm still kind of like
Figuring it out.
Yeah, still trying stuff out, or still want to like wear certain things in ways that like I haven't thought of before. And then like you said, how it's like like to document your clothes or your friends' clothes. It's kind of like I'm letting you document mine, my like
there you go.
My journey, right? So it's
that's probably a big thing, right? Where like, I mean, once you start getting that kind of confidence to look at it that way, then it's like things kind of get unlocked, right?
Yeah. Because it wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna be somewhere with Ethan, so I have to look cool also. Like it didn't really come across as that for me. It was, maybe, but in a sense, of it's my chance to like be cool too, for lack of a better way to explain it. As opposed to like, I guess I have to do it because Ethan's doing it, or I guess I have to do it because
it's a genuine want to kind of establish yourself.
It wasn't like there wasn't any pressure to be like, oh, I have to live up to like, being part of the podcast, or like being, on the blog or reading the blog, stuff like that.
Have you found yourself throughout this process questioning what it is you like for your particular identity? Again, not necessarily comparing yourself to the podcast and sensibilities, but just like finding some sense of identity in clothing and just personality in general that, okay, so at least there's some developing happening there, and that there's added confidence as I figure this out.
Maybe it's hard for me to kind of pinpoint that. If anything, it's enhancing what I already have.
Sure.
Or like,
kind
of like, it's like a, I don't know. That's kind of like a multi-layered question, right?
Well, it's anything like that. What you said makes sense. Where it's like almost like you look behind you and you started like thousands of miles away, but we just keep seeing it the same way. Where it's like, no, we're just gotta get the chambray. Okay, now get the work shirt. We're just constantly expanding things, and then we don't even realize the progress we've made, and it's just like almost that unconscious progress is the most progress.
I mean, I do think what hopefully the Discord kind of does is like, we always joke, or at least MJ and I, we joke like, oh, everyone needs like an Ethan, not only to literally give you clothes that they don't wear anymore, but also to like, and also not answer questions, but also to like take the pictures. And I'm like, yeah, everyone should have that, because I feel like, I mean, there's that little push, right? And before I get to this next thing, I want to read some comments here. So Brian says he discovered the blog back in the hashtag memory days of the Armory Tumblr, which is crazy because 2015, 2016, dude, that's started it then. And so like it's been really like, it's been a wild journey. it's been 6 years of the blog, man. He liked the blog for 2 reasons: the wealth of pictures, which I have wanted forever, because also it combines, like, it's like a Tumblr, like you see all the fucking pictures. The approachable write-ups. He doesn't fit into the typical audience. Maybe a bit older, 34, college professor, went to prep school. So it's supposed to Ivy style early on, but maybe he likes to write the really open way we approach it. Hashtag lonely boys. I mean, technically, we also have Henrik. So that's 2 in that demographic so far,
There you go.
who are college professors. And even the typical audience, I mean, I think it does help if you are like a little bit old, like a little bit younger, but it's also like the kind of like similar approach. I don't know what it's like to be a fully working adult. I've only been doing it for like 4 years, and 3 of those years was in menswear, so it's a little bit not different. But I am interested to see as things go on. We'll never be super big, but like to see how the demographics and the audience of the blog kind of go on, because even though I write for guys like MJ, obviously people from all over read it. It's just kind of cool where, like, in my head I'm writing for me, and by extension guys like MJ and Adam who think kind of like me already. But then of course you get a message from a guy who's like never, like, he's like, hey, I'm about to buy my first sport coat, I love reading this, do it, right? Like, it's like, whoa, that's crazy, like I can't even, like, I mean, how are you even able to get into it? But I'll help you, dude, let's go. Relates to guilty for gaming here. I don't know how to describe it, but these same people who are isolated but share common interests like clothing, you'd probably not want to hang out with them. Some people don't have any chill based on like and dislikes in fashion and dress. Well, the thing here is that obviously, like I said, I like boundaries. Even though I am in the Discord here, I don't want people to call me. I prefer to keep most of my conversations with people in our Discord. I don't really like, if you're asking me a question, it's fine. But typically, like, I want to keep. I use Discord for my friends too. Okay, so like I'm in a lot of other stuff.
And you
so
talked about the photo thing just now about, like helping people, but I think you've also spoken about the other side of it where it's like people assuming that they might, if they go to a dinner with you or they hang out, that it's almost like a commissioned photo shoot where it's like they're like, they're demanding almost in a way like photos of themselves just because they're hanging out. But it's like
it's only happened a couple of times, and I totally get it. Like, usually I'll do it if they look good.
Right, that's the thing, right?
But yeah. But I really want to answer the guilty for gaming here. So obviously, I think a lot of stuffy people and I don't really get along. I mean, because like I think early on the vintage people did read the blog and listen to the podcast, but because we like deviated, like, oh, sweatpants, whatever, like they just kind of stopped paying attention. It's more so, and this, I don't mean this in any way. I don't want to offend anybody, but the only thing, did Spencer laugh?
Yep.
The only thing that I do
when
get,
you start a sentence like that.
Right.
The only thing I do kind of feel sad or not annoyed, but like we do get a couple of people who like the clothing, but they feel that they are unable to actively put it into practice. And that's mainly because of our young age, mid-20s and maybe a little bit younger. We do get guys who are in college, who are trying to figure stuff out. Maybe this is the first aesthetic that they're kind of tying themselves to, And again, same thing like me. I didn't get into this until college. Before that, I just wore fucking t-shirts and plaid shorts and flip-flops like any other fucking nerd in 2009, okay? But, I totally get it. And of course you are scared of, like, being too bold, because you've also learned that that's a bad idea. Like when I was younger, like, maybe when like in like the 90s or early 2000s, you heard about the peacocking of the game, where like, okay, it doesn't matter if you're bold, like, that's a whole part of the charm. But then when you get to the point of like, the post Alpha M part of it, like, 2008, 2009, 2010, you have to be like, okay, well, I want to dress up, but I don't want to be too much because that's what people don't like. Starting to get this kind of new information, especially, and also the rise of social media makes it kind of weird. And so sometimes I realize that some of the audience is kind of in this kind of weird nebulous middle ground where like they don't know what they can do. You add that on top of feeling isolated, you don't really have a lot of friends. Maybe you do have friends, but they don't share stuff in the same way. You live in a place where it's not easy to meet a bunch of people, And I also, I mean, MJ and I, and maybe even Spencer can empathize with that because we had Christian school, so our circles were a lot smaller, you know. So I do get this. I'm not saying this to be frustrated with it, but like, I think it's the product of the blog where like because I was like that and I wrote it, maybe that it's proof that people like that who are in that stage will find it and want to be like the rest of us. Because we've had a couple conversations about like our journey, and not just as much as like style, but like confidence journey, right? Like I mean, Spencer and I, MJ, maybe like we're not the coolest of dudes,
Hey,
but at some point.
But,
I'm sorry.
I am the coolest dude.
but not to me.
Just put your sunglasses
Not to
on.
me, yeah.
But it's that idea, where like like I think that the best quote so far from Authenticity was like, I forgot which one of us said it, maybe we both said, but it's like, you want to be the cool dude, well, like or like, oh, I can't worry that's for like cool people or whatever, like that can be you too, and it's like.
And here's
we get guys who are unable to be at that stage yet. They're getting so close, but they still need that little push to be like, you know what? I am that guy. I can be like a Jake Grantham. I can be a blank.
Yeah, and I'm
ahead,
as I said, I'm the coolest guy. And I am
the blank.
As evidence, I'm enjoying a treat of cookies and milk live on stream right now. So
okay. Well, it's like a thing. By the way, this
hard.
Yeah, it's like insane. I this confidence issue never goes away. Like, I mean, we always question it. I mean, I went out in what was, I think, an aesthetically very successful outfit, but as I pass everyone in fucking like the Upper East Side of Milwaukee, every single person that passed, I am just like behind my sunglasses. I'm like, I know exactly the things they're thinking or saying to themselves after I pass them. Just like, oh, is he wearing a diaper? All these kind of things are like these judgments and all that. But like, you just have to be so fundamentally you and like claim your identity that they have no rope to hang. Like you leave them so little like to say or have judgment on that what so aesthetically works with yourself.
I have never wondered if anyone has ever thought if I was wearing a diaper, but maybe
really
now that's gonna always.
Maybe now it'll just be there.
No, you know who the first person said that to me was?
Who?
It was Scott. So I had
really?
started wearing my trousers higher, like modern trousers, like not like vintage ones, like modern trousers higher, and like doing the thing where like I cinch it, like and I intentionally get like a size, like a couple sizes bigger, so like it would, it would sit higher. And I remember doing that, and he's like, "Wearing a fucking diaper," and I was like, "Fuck, I don't want to look like that."
Oh, I'm sorry. What have I done? No, it's just
like that made me realize like I'm pretty sure like that was one of the first things where I'm like, I have to like get stuff tailored. Like, oh, I learned, okay, if you take it from the sides here, the seat here, it can still sit that high, but then it fits better, And so a lot of this, I mean, it happens. This confidence stuff really doesn't really go away. The anxieties, and maybe I wonder. I mean. No, I know, but like my anxieties come out in my writing because I am like, if it's because it's written for me, I am like I said, I'm writing to convince myself that what I am doing is cool and
the blog is tailored for you. And I think we've said that where it's like this is for you. Right. So it's hard to force other people into that narrative. We can't force you into a Games Drake suit if you don't want to be in it.
Right. But what I mean when I bring that up is because like maybe if you can realize like where I'm answering my own questions or talking to myself, it's like you latch on to that kind of thing, and it kind of brings out similar people who like, oh yeah, I also like kind of fucking like think about this stuff and I don't know what's right, and at the end of the day, like Spencer and Ethan, my thoughts didn't matter because who the fuck, there's no real answer to slouch or whatever, and so I think that does bring these guys out there where like you do kind of have this kind of like confidence thing, or you lack the friends or you lack the community aspect where like, well, this is a common thing that happens, but like, oh, I can't do that. I don't have like friends like you where we hang out and go to bars and stuff. And I'm like,
neither do we.
Just not do it, but I think like I'm like, well, we just do that. I just happen to be the one taking the pictures. It's just like there's I want people to realize that we are just like everybody else, and we do what regular people do. Like we don't really have like crazy nightlife. We go to a bar, but like we're not. Just like you, yeah.
There's a fourth tagline.
Just like you and just like you.
It's just kind of it's just kind of interesting to see because I don't know,
It is
like
kind of interesting to see.
we have we have we all have confidence issues, and we just now like Matt said, we just own it now, or we just mask like I don't care if I'm wondering about this, I'm just gonna wear it and I'll deal with my anxiety later, and just some good.
It really
like,
makes you figure your shit out, though. I think that you don't want to give them any room to hang on, so you want to figure it out.
If the blog, if we talk about just how the blog teaches you how to think, or the podcast or whatever, it's like what we've said is you're probably gonna you're gonna fidget about it. Might as well just do that later, because otherwise you're gonna be stuck in your room figuring out your outfit. And we as much as the anxiety that we have about wanting to fit in or being cool, we'd still want to go out and not be in our room. Like there's still that to us, that feeling of what, fuck it, I'm still gonna go anyway, is just slightly bigger than, well, maybe I should stay here until it's the perfect outfit. At some point, this sliding thing will go in that direction, and that's when you walk out the door.
Right.
Go ahead, Matt.
This is sort of a different. I was talking earlier in the Discord about this, sort of my before coming to this community, and then because I had come out through YouTube and all that stuff, and just that was very laborious planning, waiting it out, weighing my options. What would I do? This is what I would do. And then Hulk smash cut to the Discord, and everyone's just like, oh, I like this. I'm going to get it. It's just it's ignition. It's fiery. It's alive. We're buying things all the time on whatever scale. And it's just like, oh, this is the thing. Oh, yeah, do you have a Kaba cut? Yeah, get the Kaba cut. Or it's just like, oh, yeah, get this. Or you ask, hey, where do I get these shorts?
What you've learned, too, is that some people have already thought a lot about it beforehand, too. It's not like you're not alone in,
Right.
Do I get this or this? And you go oh, get this one, because I also spent an hour figuring out which one was the right size. The
lines are coming together, yes.
Exactly.
Go
ahead, Matt.
I was going back to when you're saying sitting in your room looking at your clothes. It gets, the more you do, it gets easier, right? I think I think a lot of hobbies, or at least also starting a lot of hobbies are similar, right? Where it's like, oh, I want to, I don't know.
Very precious.
I want to learn photography, for example, or I want to learn how to mix audio. Once you start kind of tinkering with it, or then you start watching YouTube videos, or how do I do this, or what's the barrier of entry, how much do I have to spend to get a little taste, or get a decent camera to start doing these things that I see that I think are cool. I think it's very similar to that.
We don't want to half-ass it, right?
That's the idea about hobbies is so good. Not just the approach, because that's also very important. This is not dissimilar to I'm kind of going through it now by getting into airsoft. I had never done that before.
Yeah,
and there's an aspect of MJ and them are oh, don't wait till you get the gun. We have an extra gun, just come out to something and we'll just borrow my pistol and just fucking play. And it's exactly. And I'm glad that Men's Wear and other stuff has prepared me to do that. The only reason I didn't go, by the way, is because I had to work. Guys on their fucking summer vacation. I don't know what that feels like. But that idea about hobbies, this idea about hobbies is so important, because what I've also realized about the people who are kind of not confident, but who are still trying to figure this out, is that ask them who they are, what they want to look like. They use things other than their hobbies to describe who they are, which I think is very interesting. They use their job, or it's their job or their major, right? But it's not what do you actually do, right? Do you do woodworking? Do you like to go camping? Are you a film person? Do you make films? Do you do photography? There's that, I think, and maybe, of course, it's about coming to that, figuring out what that is. But one cool thing about the way that we approach clothing is that it forced Ethan, MJ, Matt, maybe not Kishi's been doing this before us, but to kind of figure out who you are based on your hobbies, and then those clothes, or we realize that classic menswear allows us a way to show off those things. And kind of evoke our hobbies. Oh, you like camping? Well, You wear maybe you wear camp box or
Gorp.
Danner boots, and you wear Gorp, stuff like that. And it's like, oh yeah, like it's all right there. And I want people to realize that, because what I think that classic menswear, the industry in general, is very, it's very much about appearance. It's about fitting in. It's about event-based dressing, like Yoshi said. And so, but it lacks that aspect of like who you are. Like when you look at these people, like, oh yeah, like Olaf, again, a really great, well-dressed guy, but like he's like a finance guy, right? And it's kind of hard, like when people introduce themselves, like, oh, I'm just a finance dude, like, yeah, you get to wear a suit, blah blah blah. But you go, okay, I'm a finance guy who likes watching 70s films. Maybe the suits start to take like a 70s kind of spin, or I guess, or maybe not finance, but being a lawyer, like our the guy we know, Damon, who's like suits are very Tom Ford, and Tom Ford is very 70s-esque, strong shoulders, kind of Edward Sexton a little bit too. You have that kind of start to play a role into it. And like when we talk about how hard it is to get to the blog, it's like you have to be able to kind of have this introspection to figure that out, because if you don't, then that's also another barrier to dressing like the way we do, or approaching clothing in that same way. If you cannot think about who you are apart from your job, then it's going to be really tough, because if who you are is your job, then what you dress like will be for your job. That is totally combined. And so then you'll never buy anything that you can't wear to work, right? And that's a very common thing that happens on male fashion advice. And recently there was a dude, and he's not a reader of the blog, but
recap.
Yeah,
let's get it.
So this guy commented in like general discussion on MFA, was like, hey, it's been like 10 years, I finally honed it, I've got all my grail pieces that are SLP. I feel bored, and all the comments are like pushing him, like, what's wrong with it? And he goes like, well, it's like eating your favorite food over and over again, and like every day. And I'm like, and somebody, is that boring? He goes, well, it's not boring because it's great, but there's something missing. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, that's boredom, but whatever. But then I asked him, I'm like, well, I said, what do you like to do? Like, who are you? And he's like, well, I'm a guy who likes to wear SLP. I'm like, well, that's not, like, come on, like, let's think about it more deeply. We're like, SLP isn't just like, because now, like, you can have an SLP look that is not tied to the brand, that just means that there is like a general aesthetic. What does SLP look like with shorts? What does it mean to wear like a t-shirt? How can you do SLP in winter versus summer? What does SLP look like with with vintage? Or how do you do a military take on SLP? And it's like, the guy was like, oh, that's actually interesting. I'm like, yeah, because don't just be honed in on like one lens, like, I mean, or one like aspect of it. If you look at something with a general approach to a lifestyle, then you can start to figure out, hey, I'm really into SLP, but I don't have to wear something made by Saint Laurent in order to do it. You can do shorts and boots, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing, but that's where you start to figure out, like, that's how you kind of start to figure out like the next step of your style journey, right?
Yeah, that thread was really funny. I liked I think it was Chuck who he was like, did the food metaphor. And Chuck was like, well, actually it is, a lot like food in that you can choose to eat something else. And he said, it's like, well, sure, but I'll always go back to my favorite meal. And it's like, what does that even mean? Like,
yeah, then what's the problem? Right?
I wouldn't. This is right. It's like I don't think I have a favorite meal, but I have a favorite like genre of food. So it's like if it's like a burger, I'm not gonna go get In-N-Out. I'm like, okay, well, I want to try the McDonald's burger. I want
I can go to like burger a shot.
I want to go to like Umami Burger, or I want to like make my own burger. Like there's so much, like it like to feel so like tied into that kind of a thing, like not have a general approach or a holistic approach is so baffling, right? And like that's what I hope we try and teach, because I don't know about the future of the podcast, right? But like it's pretty clear, I think, that Spencer and I approach the same menswear mindset to a lot of other stuff. like I tried to show it off in with music, right? But like with film, like you can say you like heist movies, but you don't watch the same heist movie all the time. There's heist movies.
Yeah.
There's so many of them.
I mean, it's like
Also, just the idea of it capturing all of your Grail pieces, that also just seems like an impossible dream. Because it's like for us, those are always changing. What we thought was a Grail piece 5 years ago, if we had such a list, it would be different in 2 months.
Well,
It's like it's a fixed.
That's because like if you have like a checklist and the funny thing is in our Discord we had like a hey where's my checklist gang, and like some people in here were like me and Kyoshi were like nah, like we don't do checklists, like we don't have that kind of a thing. That happened. Not that you can't do what we do and have a checklist, but the meme like the very tech bro hacking your wardrobe kind of approach to it is like you're gonna end up being like that, and it's like you really like no one wants to eat the same food every day. That's stupid. Do you watch the same show? Even the show that you have has multiple episodes. Like you're not gonna watch the same episode over and over again. Like it's just fucking wild, right? Like you
love this take.
Yeah.
Ethan.
Oh, thank you. I wanna get to Guilty Free. Brian and Guilty Free Gaming got some stuff in here. So he says, this conversation is getting deep. Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point.
Going deep.
See? More than clothes.
Style and direction, a life podcast without the stuff.
We're lonely people. We're just like you. We need to write all these down. We need to write these down.
You trade.
Spencer, I don't know. These are being recorded.
I'm gonna put these. I'm gonna put them in chat. I'm just gonna put them in chat.
Yeah, wait.
Have we figured out Twitch polls yet?
I'll just put them in. I'll put them in Discord. So not to.
We came out with some great one, right? What was the one on Wednesday? Oh, I'm afraid I'm on fire. Come on, dude.
Yeah.
You gotta.
Right.
Anyway, so it says here, I think you guys have a very authentic approach to clothing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See the guys who met in Japan. No stick-up attitudes, competitiveness, and putting on airs. They just love clothing and wear it with authentic, innocent joy. Not trying to be cool or better than others. Well, maybe not Spencer, the coolest guy here.
Yeah, he's too cool.
That's cookies, man.
Yeah.
I have
Guilty for Gaming.
Yeah.
Ooh. Guilty for Gaming says, we're in 2021 now. I think everyone is more open-minded. I think the worldview is more accepting of individual style, especially coming out of 2020. Kyoshi says, I mean, it's true. That depends where you are. Guilty Free says, yeah, very white suburban areas in America knows their time is coming, and they're clinging on to whatever they can. These people, by default, in opinions, should have no weight. Generally, more people are more accepting of individuals' personal style. That inclines everyone to be comfortable and confident in their own skin. IMO. I think knowledge, staying attuned to current events, and discovering what in the world speaks to you can also help guys be more confident in the selection of dress. Absolutely. Like, I mean, I want everyone to be a well-rounded person.
Very best.
Like, it's like we are so careful, I think, nowadays to prevent for us from looking like we're one-dimensional people. Or maybe not careful now, but I think it's been inherent in the entire history of the blog and podcast, which is why we have references to things that are not menswear. And if for me, like I have this thing where like I want to not force, I want to encourage people to try out new things or to kind of have a very expanded stuff. So like with Matt, where we'll make a reference to Comedy Bang Bang, and someone goes, "Well, what's that joke?" I go, "Well, listen to Comedy Bang Bang, and you'll get it." So it's like in order to be as cool as we are. You have to be. You have to be kind of like you have to be out in the world, right? Like it's impossible to be like this and not get it.
I think
this brings me to something I want to say. Like this group is absolutely not like gatekeeping whatsoever. Like I think that's well apparent if you watch the stuff or part of our community is like this. There's no like gatekeeping whatsoever. But I think there are like just social fluency things where it's just like we like a bunch of stuff, and that hopefully we're all you listen and you're like, hey, maybe I'll check that out. And it's not just like we're excluding anyone, but I think it's just there's a lot of layers happening at once, and it's just like we joke about Sad Jokes Explained, which is also pulled from CBB. So it's just, I think if you're into all this, you just hopefully there's that want to explore with us to kind of
get in on the well. I mean, it's like the idea here is for me to FOMO from this, right? Like, I mean, in a good way, where like
Cultural
you want
FOMO,
to be
yeah.
you want to be a part of the joke. You want to know what the reference is, and
Mhm.
it's like, to do that, you just gotta kind of get out there.
Join the
right?
conversation.
Like,
Don't watch the conversation.
Join in the exactly. Like that's why we have the Discord here. Where like obviously within reason, we don't have this. I mean, thankfully, I think we by the hours of this, not everyone in Discord is free at this time to just jump in and talk with us. But
Right.
there's that idea where like, yeah, I encourage it, to at least, or it's in the chat, to like kind of provide your view, because I don't want this to be like me and Spencer and MJ and Matt up here and then everyone else down here. It's like it's literally a conversation.
And
We're just
thankfully,
talking.
it's grown beyond that. It's
not
we don't.
thrown-
It's out of our hands, and now
It's not
it just is off and running.
hot take. But
Oh, I missed that.
it's
Shit, I'll have to
but
watch
it's
that.
like the idea though is just like I was very aware that most people I met who are into style are very, well, at least early on, were very one-dimensional, and that's a very reductionist term. But like like the vintage people were like all vintage, like vintage car, vintage movies. Like,
Yeah.
it's all inclusive here. With like the menswear people, like like Gentleman's Gazette, where it's like, oh yeah, I like the idea of vintage, but I'm not gonna wear it. But I still want to do high class things. I need to know
And
which
Preston
salad
sings.
fork is the right one.
Yeah.
Oh,
How many spoons you got?
and it's
Yeah.
right, and it's like there's got to be room for some other stuff here, because it not only, again, it doesn't only just make you a more rounded person to show that you're not a menswear guy, you are a guy who is blank, could be musician, could be motorcycle rider, could be a tech guy, whatever, who is also into menswear. Like menswear becomes diluted in the interest that you have.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that's the biggest thing. And what I like about the audience is that a lot of us do it like that. Like there's so many other hobbies that we all have. Like there are people who are like Eric is super into like graphic design and knows like the history of like colors and shit. Or of course Marco, who jumped in. I don't know if we said his name because I don't know if you can hear like the ding. But Marco's got a bunch of other hobbies. Dancing and music and festivals and fucking riding his motorcycle. Who he just came back from a big trip. And it's like, as he's doing that, he happens to throw off some fits, or to get off some fits off, while he's doing
Even
that, right?
social media, we've talked about people who just have the chest shot as and that's their entire feed, and that's everything that they are. And it's like, okay, but then like, who are you? And then we see like how other people can use Instagram, just like kind of show off, kind of extension of self, and just like more things, And I think it might sometimes come off as more interesting.
Right. I mean,
yeah. Go ahead, Marco.
Yeah, I don't think it's a knock on people who just kind of mood board their Instagram and just post fits and everything on their story is a mood board. But I don't know anything about you as a person,
right?
Other than you're posting fits in the same location and you're sharing.
I mean, people have Instagram for the cats, and that's all they want to do. So it's just like these things are not strict on what you want to share.
Yeah.
But as far as like getting a picture of yourself, it's kind of like you say, where you don't know them.
Yeah. We want to know the person behind the fits.
Exactly.
I mean, I
That
think
is
that helps.
what's
It helps add context to everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you have just like the same backdrop, like just the same like framing every day, then like where the hell are you wearing these clothes? Like the context of where everything is very important to style, in my opinion.
What is interesting is that the people who just do clothing like that, so far that I've met, okay, this is not blanket statement, this is probably not true, but people like that are pretty closed off. Like they're pretty private about what they share, and they're not just on social media, but like in person sometimes.
Okay.
And you could argue that maybe our approach is just too open, right? Your lives are your hobbies, right?
I don't
like
want
that's
to
not
say that those people are not stylish. I understand why someone might also do that just for convenience's sake. If you like, as I've said before, if I had a Fit Pick studio set up in the place that I lived, I might do that. But it's nice. It's nice if you have that to supplement that with additional
other
material.
things.
Yeah, well, because it's like, like David said, of course, someone likes privacy to leave them alone.
Mhm.
It's just, times what I found too is the people who post those chest shots and everything, and this is not like, I'm talking mainly about like the hashtag menswear ones.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot, like some of these people have the strongest opinions about what is correct and what's not correct. And I feel like again, to me, there's a correlation between that and rigidity. Not everyone does that. I know people who are the friendliest guys who have great hobbies, and I DM them, they're on Reddit, whatever. But their Instagram themselves is just a fit dump. That's fine. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people who be very rigid, do chest shot,
Right.
who have and they don't allow any other context to happen, and yet they argue so much about the rules and what's right and what's wrong and what you can get away with and what's appropriate. Like, it's just interesting for like that kind of tends to happen. Again, I don't think that everyone who doesn't show their face is the same way, but in terms of this particular persona, that particular guy,
Yeah.
I am not surprised that this stuff kind of goes hand in hand.
Mm.
And it is
Yeah.
my job. I want to get back to Guilty for Gaming here. It is my thing where if we talk about FOMO, it's not really about making people feel jealous or really like
No.
wanting, like they're missing out, but it's about it's more so about aggressive or antagonistic FOMO, where it's like, I want to prove to those guys that the guys who are rigid, who maybe happen to read the blog or whatever, to be like, oh wow, there's a whole world here that you're missing out on, and you're not
fixed,
getting
right?
this. You're so
Yeah.
fixed, and to be cool and loose like us, you should try and experience it this way. You don't have to, but it's like, if you find that need of like, maybe this is a little too stiff, then you'll kind of get into it. And I try and do that not with like FOMO, like pictures or whatever, but like more like comedy and demeanor, maybe. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I am a product of like all of the hobbies that I'm into, all the comedy that I consume, and all the jokes that I love saying.
Because Ethan,
and
if
it's
you
like,
didn't change anything about how you dressed, you dressed
Wake
exactly
Wake
the same,
Spencer.
but you were very serious, and your tone in your writing was like, this is the rule of the land, and that you took yourself very seriously. I think we'd have a very different environment here,
yeah, exactly.
You're lax and you have fun, and it's casual.
And I feel like it ties in holistically. Again, I'm pretty young compared to most people who are in the hashtag menswear space now.
Right.
I'm definitely as I talked repeatedly with Henrik, I am of a different generation who approaches social media way differently.
Sure.
I am very open. I was on Tumblr. I literally blogged about my life on Tumblr. I talk about that, our first stream where I talk about my first kiss ever. That literally is written on my Tumblr, like when it happened in like 2010, so or whenever it was. I don't think I had my first kiss yet, maybe. Sad.
Check the stream. Check the first stream.
But it's like, I have this whole thing, and so FOMO, like, something we Guilty for Gaming. I'll argue that younger adults discovering personal style should get their mind out of the FOMO viewpoint. Once they discover that when they miss out on the next drop is no big deal, then they can open up their mind to other things happening in the world that can better reinforce what their style aesthetic is. From there, confidence can grow because they'll have a better context about what they can buy and like, even if they're not chatting about it with friends. It becomes internal, and that's where really confidence lives. I will say that maybe this is a semantics thing with FOMO. What I want to give you FOMO for is the relaxed mindset that we have. I want you to feel like, oh man, why can't I be like that? I'm like, yeah, well, you can do it. Just do it, man. Like, you just, I obviously it's not that easy. It requires a lot of introspection, but that's what I want people to feel FOMO for. The confidence, the ease of it, like the important thing, right? Like, that's what I think FOMO should be. And FOMO, I use FOMO because that's like the only thing I could think of, in that.
And that's why you don't just produce lists, because it is so much about sensibility. Like, you tell a person, or I like the blog, and you're like, oh, thanks. And like, how do I do it? Well, like, what do I buy? Just like, well, you just kind of treat your clothes like this. Like, I can't treat my clothes like that. So like, well, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. But this is what we're doing over here. So, and then there you get.
Yeah,
frustrated.
exactly. I mean, and the thing is, right? Like, I still share pictures. Like Marco takes his own fit pics on his own phone. Spencer does that too. You had that tripod for a little while and everything. So it's like, it's not special. It's just like, the FOMO that you should get. You should realize that the FOMO is stupid, because you have everything you need to get into it. You know,
The power
Right.
was
It is
within
so-
you this whole time.
You don't even
You were the
as cool as
dyad.
Spencer.
Yeah,
was
this is
in
why
you.
they have the rule of twos.
That's right.
No.
You know, and that, I mean, that's kind of how it is. Like, that's, you know, overall, the audience of the blog, and again, I haven't worked on anybody else's stuff. I don't know how segmented Simon's or Blamo's is. Maybe in the future, you know, I open invitation for Jeremy. I know he's a busy guy. I know that also the time difference is bad, but like, I would love to know about stuff like this. You know, just like how it's cool when we, and even in our Discord when we discuss the customers that we see from places that we've worked at, or that, you know, from ALD or whatever. Like, I really do want to know how varied it is, you know, because on the outside it can look like a lot of these places have a very monolithic audience, but so far from ever since I started, even though like there is a person in mind that likes the blog and podcast, it's usually just MJ. Because, you know, even though that's the case, there is a lot of people that are into it, and again, like, not like, they're all from different stages of life, different ethnicities, even,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
and
I've been-
despite you know,
Races, creeds.
Yeah.
Well, I've been shocked by how many listeners and, you know, patrons we have from like Scandinavia and like Northern Europe.
It's popping, man.
Yeah.
Our Scandinavian
Yeah.
buddies.
the funny thing is that the place that Ethan and MJ and Spencer live is the least represented in our own thing.
Yeah, we never talk about like winter wear. I mean, you know, I guess we don't, you know, talk about like specific topics like winter wear a whole lot anymore. But
Right.
yeah,
But
We've
it's,
moved
you know,
past it. But we'll get back to it.
you know, because it's like when I talk about like the blog and all these references and everything, it's in my head, it makes me laugh, and I'm sure MJ will go like, "That's stupid," like he'll just laugh at it, you know, when he's editing the thing, which happens, which literally does happen, you know, and it's like, the thing is, right, like if you find yourself laughing at that, or you find something that you're lashing onto, like, then the blog is for you, the podcast is for you, like that's when you when you make that connection, that's like the most important part, and
Yeah.
hopefully.
I mean,
Based on that, you know, you get to expand into other things and realize
Yeah.
just how easy it is and how holistic you can be. And I think, again, the fact that the chat is also like this too, like bring up some great topics. It's proof that, you know, the amount of one-dimensional people that read the blog or that listen to the podcast is very small. And even if they are, they eventually start being multidimensional.
They grow in dimension.
Yeah, exactly. After a little bit, right? You know, like I can think of Ivan as a good example, where when he joined in, it was very all period stuff. His casual was like a sport coat or like a tennis sweater with a tie and pants, and now, crazily enough, it's fucking great. He's wearing like aloha shirts and like seersucker shorts in our OOTD
you know,
channel.
as we were talking about, you know, with Oscar's look on Sad Head Saturday, you just can have those like same through lines no matter what you're wearing, and it's also going back to like an appreciation of minutia, just the ability to recognize these things, make these connections, which I think, you know, like it's a good, some people don't necessarily, you know, think to do that, as we saw from the guy on Reddit who you made all these connections for him, and he's like, never thought to do that.
Yeah,
but that's how you got to be to really connect with the podcast, the blog, whatever.